My father, my grandfather. The reason I'm standing in front of you is because my grandmother, Elizabeth Dodd, part Indian, part Irish, part Jewish, she fought in 1916. My grandfather fought in Boland's Mill. I have lots of medals and certificates. He's in all the annals of history. His name was Nora Casey, named after the man who authored The Rising of the Moon. My grandmother wasn't allowed into Boland's Mill because De Valera banned women from fighting in Boland's Mill. She spent most of her life ribbing my grandfather that they would have won had they let the women in. So she set about trying to blow up the line to Belfast. And when it didn't work and the explosive didn't go off, she got buckets of rocks to throw them down the line. And my grandfather came across her, and they met and they fell in love. They got the job of looking after the graves in Arbor Hill. They looked after the Easter Rising heroes' graves. My grandfather spent 2 years of his life incarcerated in Frongach in Wales, in the Curragh, and in Northern Ireland. So when De Valera did eventually get into power, and obviously hadn't listened to a word that Elizabeth had said about him, the air would be blue if you stood around her long enough, he gave them the lodge in the Phoenix Park. And that's how I ended up living there. I'll tell you why it's extraordinary that I come from that DNA, because my grandmother, she fought because she believed in the proclamation. Pride of place in my house, in all of the children, the Casey children's households. She believed that she was fighting for equality for men and women. That's what she signed up to. And yet, what she signed up to actually was her own contribution to 1916 and life being airbrushed out of history. So the reason that I didn't believe I could be a businesswoman is not because Irish women can't be great businesswomen, because before the state was established, 1 in 10 businesses were run by women in Ireland. The reason why I didn't believe it is that all of those matriarchs, like my grandmother, all those amazing women, warriors, Bill Cullen would call them, all of them with that phenomenal DNA coursing through their veins, the only outlet they had over the course of the past 100 years was in philanthropy. And most of the great charitable institutions of Ireland were set up by women. Women have ruled in the area of volunteering because they weren't allowed into the corridors of power. There's a reason why Mary and John start working on the same day for the same business, and John is 10 times more likely to get into the top corner office. There are more men called John in boardrooms than there are women. Unbelievable. More men called Paul than there are women in the boardrooms. And why is that important? It's important to me because I would like to think that my grandmother fought very hard for my right to sit in that boardroom. I talk about gender quotas all the time and people say, that's those mad feminists. It'll go away sometime soon. Well, there's a young child walking around here today. I just looked at her. Her granddaughter maybe will see the kind of 40% representation we're trying to see in Ireland. In the whole of Europe, there are 20 countries that have signed up to quotas. They all have 35-40% representation. Scandinavia leads the charge. Angela Merkel hates quotas. She still introduced it last year. Our nearest neighbour has just gone from 16% to 26%. We're still at 10%. We are lower than sub-Saharan Africa in terms of our participation in the dole. We're just above India and China in terms of women's participation in the boardrooms and at management level in businesses in Ireland. And yet, extraordinarily, I live in a country that had 2 amazing female presidents. I live in a country where almost all of the top legal jobs are held by women. I live in a country where women are making inroads in technology. When you judge women for being women, and to those people who say women don't want tokenism, when I sit around a board table, I know why I'm sitting there. I know it's because of my skills, my knowledge, my hard work. I don't know why half the men are sitting there, except they went to the same boarding school as the chairman, or they play rugby, or they play golf, or tokenism is alive and well in Ireland. I'll leave you with one quote. I use it all the time with young women, so I'd say every week, I spoke on 5 platforms this week. I try and do a school every single week, young women, to talk to young women about their potential, to unleash their potential, to grow up in an environment unlike me, where they see role models, where they can look at people and say, I want to be her. I want to be that person. I want to see a Taoiseach. It'll never happen in my lifetime, but I hope it happens in my granddaughter's lifetime. So this quote always resonates with them. The reason why women don't do well in boardrooms, in politics, in the corridors of power, is we're constantly being judged in comparison to men. A famous politician once said to me, it's not so much being a woman that held me back, it's the fact that I wasn't a man. And that's exactly what I feel all the way through my life. So if you judge women on their standards, on the phenomenal contribution they make to society, to business, they will always, always succeed. That's why they're at the helm of the legal profession and the accountancy profession. So here's the quote. Unfortunately, it comes from a man. Einstein. He said, everybody's a genius. I believe that. I worked with Young Traveller Women last year for a series for RT where I took a girl who had only been to school for 10 weeks the whole of her life. She'd never learned to read or write. Last night I was wearing her collection, which has gone into the Kilkenny shop. She now employs people in the traveller community. Everybody's a genius. Everybody should have that potential and the ability to have it unleashed in their life. But if you judge a fish by the way it climbs a tree, it's going to spend its whole life believing it's stupid. Thank you for listening.